Welcome everybody, my name is Niels van den Broek and together with Peter we will be having a presentation. Please feel free to ask some questions and let's kick it off. Xebia is an airline company and we were founded in 1965 to tease the KLM because our founder hated the KLM and now we're part of the KLM. And in the end, we had a great journey. And probably the most important thing that people don't know is that actually we have a French company as well. And so we're a lot bigger than everybody thinks. And now we're present in 7 locations, including Belgium. We have about 19 million passengers each year. We do about 120,000 flights. We have 160 destinations. We have 110 planes, all Boeings, and we're migrating to Airbus because everybody needs to be environmentally friendly. We have 5,000 employees. We do about 160 destinations. Like I told you, we fly mostly to the Mediterranean. So if you ever want to go on a holiday or do a city trip, use Xebia because it's good for his paycheck and mine bonus. and now let's focus on the future. Why are we here today? 6 years ago, I got hired by Xebia, and I had a story about if you want to be a successful logistical company, it's all about managing your processes, managing your data, and managing your data integration, so that you can be any place, anywhere, anytime, and adapt to all disposable experience products that consumers use. In that period, I failed about 15 times. And why did I fail? Is because every organization or consultancy firm that you hire has this big upfront approach where you either do a complete Lean Six Sigma program, you have this 7-layer data management model that you need to pitch to your board of directors, and the only thing they think is overhead, 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 and how the hell are we going to do this? So after 4 years, I encountered this guy, and we started talking about, well, what can we do to make sure that we get the company where it wants to go? And because we were also struggling with portfolio management, and every time that I was proposing for an architecture, well, let's do this program because in 5 years' time we need to be there, it always failed. And so we started talking about, let's turn it around, and let's talk about something that was invented by Philips somewhere in the 90s, and it's called biggest bleeders first. So there are people out there in the company that have problems, or that lose face, or are bashed by their manager because there is something going wrong that's not correct. And so the first thing that happens in our company is that something is called departure time. And departure time is actually a brilliant phenomenon, because if you talk to the stewardesses, departure time is when the door of the plane closes. If you talk to the pilots, departure time is when the plane docks from the gate and goes to the runway. If you talk to our operational control center, the departure time is when the plane actually stops touching the ground. So when those people are in the same room and talk about departure time, the fun starts happening. You take some popcorn and confusion all over the place. Then the second problem that we have is that we have customers, but the customer is not a passenger. And a passenger is sometimes not a customer. And sometimes a passenger actually can't be reached because the customer is a middle person. And so when we want to do upselling, or we want to have a delay notification, we want to reach out to the customer because the customer gave his email address, but the passenger is unknown. And so you probably read it here. So delays happen, and sometimes a plane from Xebia leaves Malaga without any passengers on board, and then people complain about not being notified. That's because they bought their ticket by TUI, and TUI doesn't give the customer information to us, so we don't know the passenger information. We just know that we have 180 TUI people on board. The third is, we have some brilliant programs running on AS400. Yeah? Programmed by people that are probably dead by now. What the program does, what it means for us, we don't know. And our compensation scheme for our stewardesses, where they spend the night and what they do, yeah, is run on that. And nobody knows what it does. Nobody knows what it does. Yeah? And are looking around for people to refactor it and all that kind of stuff, but we don't even know where the data comes from. Marketing people, brilliant people. They never heard of GDPR. Yeah, they never heard of GDPR, and they share it to everyone, everywhere, any place, anytime, by email in Excel. Yeah, minor problem. Yeah, minor problem. Next one. I enjoy this one a lot. Whenever we do changes, we use business cases, and commercial people, yeah, start making business cases. And 4 years ago, we started rebuilding our app because we could have attracted 70 million more in revenue. We did the math. People needed to be sitting on the wings of the airplane in order to get half of the revenue. Next one, definitions. 4 weeks ago, we had this huge problem in Rotterdam. We had a shortage of crew. Crew consists of two kinds of people, pilots and cabin attendants. And we have a very, very ambitious cabin attendant director. So he gave up his tennis play and went calling and arranged 40 stewardesses to go to Rotterdam. It turned out we had a problem with pilots and no plane left. Huge amount of cost. Next one. This is a funny part. We have technical services. They have, and the aviation industry is well known by suites that are, for you guys, like dinosaurs. Yeah, doesn't even come close to being SaaS, PaaS, or anything like that. Runs on premise, does nothing, and all that kind of stuff. So our technical services, rather than walking about 150 meters to their desktop PC and entering that a plane is back into services, called the OCC, our Operation Control Center, the plane is back in service, and they entered the due date for plane is back in service in an application that was not the primary source of truth for when the plane needed to be entered in services. And of course, we decommissioned that application and migrated to something else, and all of a sudden, we did not know anymore when planes were back into service. Cost us an awful lot of money. This one is the most funny part of it. 7 years ago, we had this brilliant, I mean, really, really brilliant woman that figured out that our communication style was too long. And so she created awful lots of code that could tell that there was an operational incident. And she created this beautiful code for luggage was lost. But she failed to check that there was also international code, and the same code meant Boeing crashed. Yeah, it was a big incident. Yeah. Good. And this is where the beauty came in. Because we recognized this, we talked about it, and we started to think about, well, all these people have problems, and all those people don't want to be made fun of, like I just did, and want to be successful. And so let's start, based on their use cases, let's start helping them. So 1.5 years ago, our finance department was understaffed, and I managed to play something with budgets, and I created a budget. I hired him. And we decided, he forbid me to talk about data governance, and we just talk about data management based on use cases. And so we hired 5 people to help business people. And from that, we set up a process. We built a data catalog. He's going to be telling you about it. And we created 60 data products. And we're now officially part of the business technology strategy of Xebia. We are talking to our board of directors on a regular basis, and we are well confident that even the data management office that we need with data stewards is going to be realized within 2 years because the business wants it. Because in our last budget round, some high-up managers actually had data stewards in their budget, and that was a big success. So we feel that if you want to be successful in becoming data-driven and get a data management office in your organization, you need to do both. Find the top-down sponsor, but if you want to make a change, do it use case driven, yeah, mobilize the people, make them sure that they understand and take your time. Well, this is my part of it. Now you get the technical part by Peter. I'm very, very happy that he's one of my colleagues. He's our data architect, and I could have done it without him. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So, as Niels explained, I joined Transavia like 1.5 years ago, and I found this mess that he just explained. You were laughing. I was not laughing at the moment. It was quite difficult to start in that way. But as I said, we decided not to do a top-down data management program, but turn it around and start bottom-up. We partnered with an important strategic program for Transavia, and we actually started doing a use case-driven approach. I'll talk about that first, and then, as I promised, I'll also talk about data catalog after. So you recognize probably some of these logos, right? We all want to be a data-driven organization. We want to do that so that we have better sales, lower cost, happier customers. But to be able to do that properly, it's important to do your data management right. Otherwise, you get all these issues and mistakes that Niels just explained, right? You get definitions that are all over the place. You get metrics that are not calculated properly, or you get data pipelines that break all the time. So you need to do data management properly. What is data management? Who has read or knows the book Dama, DM book, this thick blue thing, right? Yeah, some people here know it. Have you read it also? Or? Sort of, yeah. So let me help you by summarizing the book. This is kind of what's in there. I've summarized it for you. I think as an organization, if you are able to answer these 10 questions, you're doing it pretty well. I once had a session at Transavia where I asked the entire audience, it was all IT people, to stand up. And we made the agreement, if you have a yes on this question, you're allowed to stay standing. If it's a no, you need to sit down. It took me 4 questions and the entire room was sitting again. Right, so this was kind of where we were and what we're trying to achieve. There are 2 main drivers actually for this, and it's recognizable as the offensive and defensive data strategies that we might know from the past. You either do this to get more value out of your data, to use it to make better decisions, to get to those decisions more quickly, or you do this to become in control of your own data, make sure that you follow internal and external rules and regulations. Right? These are the main drivers. This just as a very short recap on what is data management and what are we trying to achieve. I'll get to the use case approach directly. I'm not sure how I'm doing in time, so let me check. Half an hour left. Oh, that's great. Then I can take my time. One last thing about data management. It is not only a technology problem. So we lured you in a little bit with the data catalog as a topic for today, but only implementing a data catalog and thinking that that will solve your problems automatically is not going to happen. You need to address people and processes also. Niels talked about hiring people for the data steward role, helping the business grow in that from a maturity perspective, making sure you have the right processes in place is very important, and technology can enable you there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe a question in between.
Yeah?
When you talk about the...
Me 1 second, because otherwise people online won't hear.
Okay, thank you. One question. You talk about data stewards. Is that a role or is it really a function within Transavia?
Could be either way. Currently, it is a role, and we're talking to the board of directors to really make it a function in the future.
It depends on not every department is big enough to have a function specialized for that. And so also we're thinking about in the first phase centralizing, because if you do not do it enough, you will not become effective and efficient in it. So more like a centralized body that hires people or gives people to departments and coaches them. Because the autonomous, everybody is able to create their own capabilities needed. It's very good in textbooks, but in reality it's hard stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, no problem. All right, so as I said, technology is not the magic bullet here. It needs to enable, it needs to support. And we actually started with the other 2 first, and I'll get to that. As I said also, and that's typical for how Xebia approaches things, we want to take a use case-driven approach. We want to start small and show value soon and early instead of having this big program in place. Now let's take a use case that we've actually done, which is route profitability, right? We'd like to really know our flight from Amsterdam to Barcelona in the summer season of 2023. How profitable is this, right? Because that's really important for us as an airliner. What teams typically do, analysts, business people, engineers, when they pick up a use case, I'll show you it now. So we have route profitability. We figured out we need to have a business definition in place, right? We want to make sure that everybody's talking about the same thing. Typically, this is something that you do maybe in refinement. It ends up in some wiki page where you have this definition, but it's not readily available. Another thing that we learned is we need to have a metric, a calculation method, how we are going to take those costs that we make as an organization, take the revenues that we make, and how are we going to allocate those things to the proper metric and to this use case. What you will find if you do this use case is that these allocation factors are actually business logic, and typically then that ends up in your ETL pipeline, in your data warehouse somewhere, right? It ends up in code. So we need to figure that out. It takes quite some time, analysts, business people talking to each other, doing lots of refinement to figure out and get this knowledge. We also, of course, need to find the right sources of data. So we went to finance. They did a lot of stuff with Excel, as finance does. And we had to learn what are the actual source systems where we can get the trusted data in a stable form. So we figured out what are the sources of data. And you see a little bit of data lineage for those who know what it is being created here in this overview. Then, of course, once that is all there, the team can get to work. They started building a data warehouse, data warehouse tables, building the pipelines. They were able to create a BI dashboard, which is, because we've done this properly, a trusted BI dashboard. I put that there on purpose, right? Because now the business knows this is how you calculate it. These are the sources that we trust. So it's a dashboard that can be used and that's trusted by users. You probably figure out, well, maybe there's some legacy stuff there. We need to have a talk about what are we going to do with the legacy stuff that's been built in the past. Of course, you get questions about quality, so you need to address that topic, maybe build some quality rules, at least do some data profiling. And then last but not least, you want to do some governance. As Niels said, that's a word I'd rather not use because it's a bit tainted, but you need to do something with your data ownership, your data steward. You might want to do something with data contracts, because as you can imagine, this information, route profitability, it's kind of sensitive. We don't want our competitors to know which routes are very profitable because they might try to steal those from us. So we actually don't want this information to be available too much. Right? And what you see here is actually a knowledge graph. It's a knowledge graph of our own data where we put all the knowledge and analysis that we do, we write it down, and we want to make it available. And in this use case itself, there's already a lot of value, right? I already touched on a few of those. It helps in user adoption. It helps in improving the quality. It makes data more discoverable. In other use cases, we've, for example, seen things like technical debt reduction. That's here on the bottom. Right, so we've seen use cases that do a select star in an application database, and they just get all data in during the night, and the application then changes something, and everything breaks down. Right, I think you've all been there. Right, technical debt that you want to avoid. We find those things in use cases, and we try to address them. Another maybe that's good to mention is the collaboration. We are trying to cross silos because we have finance people, we have business people on the marketing side that are interested in this. We have IT engineers, we have data engineers, and we make them work together. And I think that's a big part of data management, is putting all these different people together, let them have a conversation about the data that they're using, and let them grow a more shared understanding of what they're doing. So there's a lot of value in each use case. But it's more than that, right? So if we zoom out a little bit, every use case that we do properly will fuel reuse and speed up the next one. Also here, real-life examples. We have, it's called actually Scenario Factory. So we're looking ahead for 5 years' time ahead. What are the routes that we want to fly on in 2028? Of course, when you start doing these scenarios, you want to use the same calculation factors, the same metrics. You want to use the same business logic, because how can you determine where you want to fly in the future if you're comparing that differently than what's profitable today? Right? So all these things that you have found out in this first use case, you can reuse, and you can speed up this use case tremendously. I hope that makes sense. And what you also do with this next use case is you build further on your own knowledge. You build further on your own knowledge graph. So you pick up some other sources, you do the data modeling, you do the data quality checks, you write down the business definitions, and slowly your knowledge graph of your own data grows. Next use case, financial reporting, same story. You want to use the same business logic. You probably want to use the same trusted data sources that you've been using before. And all that analysis and searching for the right data has been done, and you can reuse and you can leverage that. So slowly but gradually, you start building actually this knowledge graph. This is your dot on the horizon. This is where you want to go. Sneak peek. The data catalog that we selected has this knowledge graph architecture as its basis. And why is that fun? Why is that interesting? Why will that help you? You can start asking questions towards this knowledge graph. For example, what customer data do I have in my entire organization? You remember that 10 questions summary that I showed you earlier? You can start asking these questions to your own knowledge graph, and you can quickly and easily find the data that you're looking for. Instead of, we actually asked this to a bunch of people internally, how do you find your data? Some answers that we got, oh yeah, I've been here for 5 years, so I kind of know where to go. Or I ask my neighbor, and he knows a guy, so I send an email to that guy, and then maybe I'll get a reply. Right? These are the ways that people try to find data. We are trying to change that. We want people to go to the data catalog, type in, well, where can I find customer data, and then they get an answer. And it might not be everything that they need, but at least it's a starting point. And you can ask many types of questions, right? So from a compliance perspective, if I'm a data privacy officer or I'm a data owner, I want to know where's my sensitive data. That's from a compliance perspective. Or if you want to do a use case and you're looking for your data, that's the place to go. If you don't find the information directly that you need, at least you find the data owner and the data steward that are attached to a particular topic. So you can go to those directly instead of asking your neighbor. And if we take it a little bit further, and it also means further in time, because that requires a bit more maturity, we can start automating things. We can start applying, for example, GDPR policies. We can maybe do access management from a data catalog. So you find a Power BI report that you like, well, let me request access directly, and then the message goes to the data owner, and you might or might not get access to the Power BI product. All these kind of things are the things that you can do if you're a bit further with the implementation. I'll leave it to that. I think the message is clear. You want to build your knowledge graph, you do that use case by use case, and this is where you end up with. All right. So far, we haven't talked about technology. We only talked about people and process. Right, so let's dive into the technology a little bit. And again, having a check. We're doing perfect on time. Who knows about the modern data stack?
Whoa.
Everybody, I guess, most people. I kind of just put some random, no, not random. I put logos here in the different functional capabilities that we typically see in a modern data stack. I know it's all over the place, right? So at Transavia, we don't have this stack. We have a limited number of these logos, just to give you a sense of the things that your teams or your engineers are probably using. And on the bottom, again, you see the knowledge graph for this use case. And why did I do that? I want to show you that a lot of the things that we do in this use case, the engineers actually use these tools to do that. Right? So your dashboards, Power BI, Tableau, or any other BI tool that you're using. Your data quality, you might use DBT tests, SODA, Great Expectations, or run some Python tests, whatever, but you use tooling to do the data quality checks. You get source data from somewhere, you need to integrate with it, so you might use some of these tools for that. Then, of course, you want to store your data, mostly in a tabular form, somewhere in Snowflake, Azure Synapse, or SQL Server. And then you want to orchestrate and build ETL pipelines, right? So a lot of these things that you do in a use case, this is the tooling that you use. You also see that some of the things that we want to do, right, like storing these definitions, making sure that the metrics are well defined, they don't have a place yet. And I believe that the data catalog is really the place, or the data management tooling that you use is really the place where you also put that information. So that you have one central place where you can find all that stuff that you have analyzed instead of the Teams folder or the wiki or maybe in the brains of analysts and engineers that are leaving your company anyway in a couple of years. You want to have this somewhere. And then lastly, what you also want to do, and that ties in a little bit in why I don't like data governance. Data governance, like in the past, it was something that in my view was really parallel to what was actually in the code. I remember that people were in meeting rooms, and I started at a bank, so it was even in suits and ties. They were in meeting rooms talking about how are we going to manage our data and how the hell are we going to comply to GDPR. And then they made some agreements with each other. They wrote it down in a beautiful Word template. It was stored somewhere, and that was it. And then if you turn around and you went to the engineers that actually worked with the data, they didn't know this, right? They didn't care about this, and something completely different was happening in the code than what was happening in the data governance team. And that bridge that's there, that gap, that's what we want to bridge, to cross actually. And I believe that we need to do that by automation. We need to use all the metadata, the information about what we do that is inside that modern data stack, and bring that into the data catalog. I created a beautiful visual for that. You can see that right here. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to achieve at the moment. So we're trying to leverage all that information that is in DBT, that is in Power BI, that is in your data quality tooling, and automatically bring that into your data catalog and use that to have a very rich environment where you can find information about your data. So this is the approach. A data catalog. Who is looking into this as a functionality, or who has that already in place? All right. Could have been more, but that's a good thing. Then I can educate you a bit on what it is and maybe get you excited. So a data catalog is in essence 10 functionalities. Let me build it up a little bit, and I'll share some learnings also. So the front end of a data catalog is actually this: data discovery and a business glossary. That's where people go. They search for what they need. They find data sets, data products, BI reports, definitions, etc. So this is really the outward-facing part of your catalog. That is enabled by these three things: having a store, a metadata store, where you store all this information, not the actual data. The actual data stays in place, but the metadata, information about your own data. You need to do that in a certain structure, so that's where you use a metadata model for. I can go into that a little bit more later. And you want to integrate, right? I showed you this picture with these beautiful arrows. You want to have connectors to these source applications so that you can integrate. This is what makes it possible. And then you have features and functionalities that you can use here. You can, for example, create governance workflows. I now have a data product that contains PII data. I know that because there's a tag in my code. That means I need to signal the data owner that he needs to, I don't know, do access reviews every 6 months, because then we're secure. Or we are seeing that we have conflicting definitions, like the examples that Niels gave. We need to tag the data stewards and let them know that we need to figure out why do we have conflicting definitions, right? You can create these workflows with it. An important one, especially for the data teams, is data lineage, getting an understanding of how data flows from your source into your data application, into your BI tooling, and specifically knowing when something goes wrong. Right? That's most important. With proper data lineage and having some kind of signaling or alerting in place, you can, for example, do a pop-up in your BI tool and let your users know, this dashboard has not been updated during the weekend because we had a problem with our batch. Be aware of it if you use it. Right? These kind of things are the things that you can do if you have this insight. Another one that we've put as optional is data quality and data profiling. Some of the data catalogs out there actually do this as a feature, some not. If it's not, you can also use a third-party application for that. At least you want to have the output of your data quality checks in the catalog so that you know what's the quality of my data. Data contracts I talked already a little bit about. And then lastly, reporting. And Niels asked me to mention this specifically because, as he said, it's not only bottom-up, it's also top-down. What we also want is not only the carrot, but also the stick to hit with. We want to create reports.
To motivate.
To motivate, yeah, exactly. That's the word I was looking for, thanks. We want to create reports, for example. Well, we have this data domain. They have like 20 data products, but we see that for 15 of those, the definitions are still not clear, or the data quality rules have not been implemented. With these kind of reports that we create, we can go to the proper management layers and point out to the right people and the responsible people that they need to get their shit together. Right? So that's the reporting function. I promised you a few learnings, and then I'll give you some time for questions. So what we did actually, it took us quite a while. I'm an impatient guy, so it took me a bit too long. But it took us 5 months to come to the right selection of data catalog. We did a proof of concept with a bunch of with 2 data catalogs actually. We learned a lot. We also ditched those 2 because they didn't fit our requirements. So we did a full RFP with demos and everything, and we came to a selection. And let me share some of the learnings that we had during those 5 months. First of all, your search, your front end, where also business users are going to be, data stewards, people looking for data, it really needs to be as intuitive as Google. The UI really needs to be user-friendly. Yeah. We learned that the hard way, and I have an example here, right? So we did a proof of concept, very small scope. One of the dashboards that we had in scope was about service requests that we got. It's called Service Partner. And you see that if we type service space partner, which is a very intuitive way of searching, right? It doesn't give you the right answer. You need to have in this proof of concept, we need to have an exact match, which is not user-friendly enough. So that was really a problem that you need to look out for. Another one, it needs to have the proper fit with your technology landscape, relates to the metadata store and integrations, right? So really do a check. Is my data catalog able to connect to the BI tooling that I'm using, to the ETL tooling that I'm using, to the data warehouse that I'm using? And don't trust them on their fancy sales slides, etc. Don't trust them on their promises, but maybe if you can do a proof of concept, because these integrations are quite difficult to get right and are very important if you want to reach that automation objective that I talked about. Then you would like to have a meta model, and it needs to be configurable in your tool. And then meta model is maybe a bit difficult to explain. I can do an entire talk on that, but it reflects the way that we look at our data organization. And we have a small one here. It's a simplistic version of our actual meta model, but in the core we put a data product. That's the core of what we want to manage. We want to be in control of our data products. You see, there are different types of data products. For example, a Power BI dashboard or a source data set could also be something different. Each data product has a bunch of data elements, a data owner and a data consumer that's connected via a data contract. So this is how we look at our data landscape, and what we want, 10 minutes, thanks there. What we want is that the data catalog can actually represent these things in the tool quite easily. And we also learned that that's not always the case, right? So we did a proof of concept, and we wanted to have this data product as the core entity. It's all anonymized, that's why you see some gray areas here. But what we learned is, we did a lot of scanning, we found tables, and we wanted to say, well, these tables are part of the data product so that you can search on it. But it was not part of the core functionality of the tool. You really had to go here, you can't even read it, so small is it. Here is data product. And the same is true for data quality. We wanted to import metrics from our data quality tool that are related to this table so that you can see in an eye wink. Is that an English word? Oogopslag? Eye wink. You can see very easily, sorry for that. You can see very easily what the quality of the data is. Again, not part of the core structure of the product, but found somewhere there in the bottom. This is not what you want. So that's why also we chose to go in a different route where we selected a product where it's really on the front page, it's configurable, you can put it where you want to put it so that it's in the face of the users instead of somewhere in the corners of your tool. Then, how do you come to your final decision. I already said a little bit about it. We did a RFP. We asked a bunch of vendors to come to us and explain to them, based on our requirements, why they think their tool is a right fit. You are, of course, very curious what that was, so I'm just going to show you this. This is actually kind of the outcome of our entire 5 months process. And we selected data.world as our data catalog in the end of the day. We are in the middle of implementing it. It's a SaaS application that is very flexible. It has this knowledge graph architecture. We are very pleased with the selection that we made.
Maybe it's worth mentioning that you deviated from Air France KLM.
Oh, yeah, that's a fun story also. I do have time for that very shortly. So Transavia is part of Air France KLM. And Air France KLM was kind of 2 months ahead of the curve compared to us. So when we did an RFP, we kind of got to know that they selected Calibra. And they told us, you must use Calibra because you are our daughter company, and we bought it, so we have a contract, so you must use it. It was a very fun political debate, and we had to prove very factually why Calibra doesn't match with our technology landscape. Some of the things that I showed you about the connectors, for example, were not there. It even went to the group CTO at the end of the day, and we got some delays there. But we managed to convince them, actually, based on the facts, why we should choose another one. So that's it. Yeah. All right, that was it. Thank you.